Picture this. A chain link gate. A California sun hammering the tarmac at 3 in the afternoon. Two men face each other across 20 feet of open ground, and one of them is about to make the most expensive assumption of his life. The man on the left is Commander Dale Reeves, United States Navy, decorated veteran, former collegiate heavyweight boxing champion, 214 pounds of institutional authority in a pressed uniform. He has just pointed at the other man and issued the kind of order people don't refuse on a military installation. His voice hasn't wavered. His jaw hasn't moved. He has given this order the way a man gives it when he has never once been told no. The man on the right weighs 138 pounds. He is wearing civilian trousers, a plain short-sleeved shirt, and a pair of ordinary lace-up shoes. He has no badge, no insignia, no visitor lanyard. He looks, by all reasonable measures, like someone who took a wrong turn off the freeway. The two MPs flanking the commander are already moving forward, hands loose at their sides, ready to escort this inconvenient stranger back through the gate and out of everyone's afternoon. 41 witnesses will later agree on what happened next. Not one of them will fully agree on how long it lasted. This is that story. The date was September 14th, 1967. The location was Naval Air Station Alameda, a sprawling military installation sitting on a man-made island in San Francisco Bay, east of Oakland, connected to the mainland by a single causeway. By mid-September, the Bay Area summer had cooked the tarmac to a surface temperature high enough to soften rubber. The air smelled of jet fuel, salt water, and machine oil, the specific scent of American military power in the era of Vietnam. The facility hosted regular unarmed combat training demonstrations that week, part of a broader program to evaluate hand-to-hand combat methodology for Navy personnel. Instructors from civilian backgrounds had been invited to observe and, in some cases, demonstrate techniques to the base's physical training staff. It was one of those peculiar mid-century arrangements where the military's hunger for effective combat methodology briefly opened a door between the institutional world and the civilian one. Commander Dale Reeves ran that door. At 36, Reeves had been boxing since he was 11 years old in Akron, Ohio. He had compiled a collegiate career record of 22 wins and 2 losses, both losses by decision, neither by stoppage. After the Navy, he had continued competing in sanctioned bouts in the Bay Area amateur circuit, finishing with a combined record of 47 wins, 3 losses, and 1 no contest. He stood 6 feet 1 inch tall. He moved with the precise, economical posture of a man who has conditioned his body for 30 years to generate maximum rotational force through a kinetic chain that started at the ground and ended at his fist. In the Navy's hand-to-hand program, Reeves was something of a legend. He had been the primary unarmed combat instructor at Alameda for 4 years. His students, junior officers, and enlisted personnel alike described his classes with a mixture of respect and genuine fear. His left jab was described by one training partner as arriving before you decided to look for it. His footwork was collegiate caliber even past 40. He had the measured confidence of a man who had been tested at every level available to him and had never been found wanting. That morning, Reeves had conducted 2 training sessions and reviewed a demonstration by a judo instructor from San Jose. By all accounts, the day was proceeding exactly as planned. Then someone let a civilian through the south entrance without a proper escort. Reeves spotted him from 50 yards, a slight Chinese-American man, maybe 5'7", walking with the unhurried quality of someone who had nowhere in particular to be. The man had stopped near the demonstration area where Reeves's staff was setting up equipment. He was watching, not with the wide-eyed curiosity of a tourist, and not with the note-taking focus of an evaluator. He was watching the way a mechanic watches an engine, cataloging, assessing, finding the tolerances. Reeves didn't know that look, but it bothered him. He crossed the tarmac with 2 MPs and asked the man to identify himself. The man looked at Reeves with a calm that Reeves would describe, weeks later, as the most unnerving calm he had ever encountered in another human being. He gave his name. Reeves didn't recognize it. His name was Bruce Lee. He was 26 years old. He had come to Alameda that afternoon at the invitation of one of the civilian demonstration coordinators, a man named Alan Sato, a Japanese-American judo instructor who had been corresponding with Lee for 8 months about combat methodology. Sato had arranged for Lee to observe the demonstration sessions as a credentialed civilian consultant. The paperwork, apparently, had not reached Commander Reeves. What Reeves saw was this: a young Chinese-American man of modest physical dimensions who seemed to have materialized on his installation without the correct authorization. What he did not see, what he had no frame of reference to see, was the 14 years of daily training compressed into the stillness of that posture. The chain of events that had carried Bruce Lee from a rooftop in Hong Kong, where he'd learned Wing Chun under Ip Man, through the streets of Seattle, through a 1964 demonstration in Long Beach that had left professional martial artists unable to explain what they'd witnessed, and finally to this patch of tarmac in Alameda. But there were details, if you knew how to read them. The hands, for one. The knuckles on Bruce Lee's right hand had a specific topography. Layered callus tissue built over years of iron palm conditioning. The skin thickened to a texture that suggested not weight room vanity, but something older and more functional. His feet were already shoulder-width apart, not because he had shifted into a stance, but because that was simply how he stood. The weight was forward, on the balls of his feet. The spine was vertical and relaxed. One of the MPs, a 22-year-old from Memphis named Specialist James Corwin, would later say in a letter to his family that the slight man near the equipment seemed to be doing absolutely nothing, and that for some reason he found it difficult to look away. Commander Reeves did not share that instinct. He issued the order to leave. The order was clear, and it was not unkind. The installation was a restricted area. The man did not have the correct clearance. The gate was 30 yards south, and there was no reason this had to become complicated. Alan Sato appeared from the direction of the briefing tent at that moment, moving quickly, holding a folder. He called out, "Commander, he's with me. He's who I told you about. This is the man from the Long Beach demonstration." Reeves turned to look at Sato. Then he turned back to look at the slight man, standing perfectly still in the September heat. But here's where it changes. Reeves had heard about Long Beach. Every serious practitioner in the Bay Area combat community had heard about Long Beach, and Reeves was a serious practitioner. He had heard the stories. A demonstration in August 1964 before 500 martial artists. A man who had performed a 1-inch punch that sent a full-grown adult skidding backward across a floor. He had heard the claims about a punch that took 0.05 of a second to travel 6 inches. He had filed those stories in the category where he filed all stories that arrived without his personal verification. Interesting, possibly exaggerated, requiring proof. He looked at the man in front of him. He decided, in that moment, to require proof. What followed was not a threat. It is important to say that plainly. Commander Dale Reeves was not a violent man, and he was not a reckless one. What he issued was, by the standards of his world, a reasonable professional challenge. The kind that men in his world issued to other men in his world to establish baseline credibility in a competitive environment. He said, in a voice that carried to everyone in the surrounding 30 feet, "If you're who they say you are, prove it. We've been watching demonstrations all week. Show us one thing that your training does that ours doesn't." 41 people heard this. Reeves's 4 training staff, 7 MPs, 11 trainees who had come out of the tent for a break, several civilian observers, including Alan Sato, and 2 junior officers who happened to be walking past. The challenge had the quality of a door opening, not violently, but opening in a direction that meant something. Bruce Lee was quiet for a moment, not the quiet of uncertainty, the quiet of a man reading a situation the way a surveyor reads terrain, measuring distances, calculating surfaces, determining what is load-bearing and what is not. His eyes moved once across the group of onlookers. They settled on Reeves with the specific quality of focus that Sato, standing 20 feet away, recognized immediately. He had seen it in Long Beach. He stepped back half a pace involuntarily. Lee's voice, when he finally spoke, was light and measured. He said, "What would you like to see?" Reeves said, "I've been told you can stop a punch before it reaches you, that you can read an attack before it starts. Show me that." One of Reeves's training staff, a petty officer named Marcus Webb, who had 4 years of boxing and 2 years of wrestling, said, quietly but audibly, "He's 140 pounds. Come on." Nobody laughed. Something about Lee's stillness had already made the space strange. Lee turned his attention to Commander Reeves. He said, "Would you be willing to throw a punch? A real one. Not a demonstration. A real one." Reeves said he would. Alan Sato took one more step back and pressed his folder against his chest. Lee said, "Throw it when you're ready. Not when I signal. When you decide." One person, Webb, tried to say something about stopping this. Reeves raised a hand, and Webb went quiet. This was Reeves's world, and in his world, challenges were met. He was not angry. He was, if anything, curious. He had 214 pounds and 47 sanctioned victories, and the kinetic mechanics of 30 years of training behind him. The math seemed straightforward. He took 2 steps forward to close the gap. He set his feet. He breathed once. Then he threw the punch. In the first second, 2 things happened simultaneously. And because they happened simultaneously, the 41 people watching would spend years arguing about the sequence. Reeves's right hand left his shoulder. It was a cross, the most powerful single tool in a trained boxer's kit, loaded from the hip rotation, driven through the shoulder, transferring the full mass of a 214-pound man through 4 inches of knuckle. By every metric available to sports science in 1967, it was a technically sound, fully committed, dangerous punch, the kind that had ended 47 fights. And Lee was not where he had been. Not jumped back, not ducked under. He had shifted 6 inches to his left, an angular deflection built on Wing Chun centerline theory. The principle that the shortest and most efficient defense is a movement that changes the line of attack without abandoning your own position. The shift was not defensive in the traditional sense. It was more like a door closing quietly on nothing. In the second, Lee's left hand was already in motion. Not a strike, a pack saw. A deflecting palm that met Reeves's extended forearm, not with force but with redirection. The touch was light. The result was not. Reeves's arm crossed his own centerline, opening his entire left side for the half-second it takes to recover from an overextended cross. Lee did not strike. That was the thing nobody expected. He had the opening. The kind of opening that, in a real fight, ends conversations. His right hand was already chambered. The kinetic chain was loaded. The distance was correct. Every calculation pointed in one direction. He didn't fire it. Instead, he stepped back to his original position. Feet shoulder-width apart. Weight forward. Spine vertical. The crowd went silent. Not from shock. Not from confusion. From that particular quality of silence that arrives when something you cannot categorize has occurred in front of you and your brain is still running the calculation of what it just witnessed. Commander Reeves's arm was back at his side. He was breathing normally. Nothing had hurt. Nothing had connected. And yet he was standing in a position he had not intended to occupy. His punch had gone somewhere it had not been aimed, and the slight man in the civilian shirt was standing exactly where he had been standing before, in the exact same posture, looking at Reeves with an expression that contained no triumph, no performance, and no invitation to continue. Marcus Webb said, very quietly, "Do it again." Reeves looked at Lee. Lee waited. Reeves threw a left jab, faster than the cross, less loaded, snapping. The weapon of a man who has thrown 50,000 jabs. His fastest technique, the one that, in 47 fights, had arrived before opponents decided to look for it. In the next second and a half, 3 things happened in a sequence so compressed that nobody would agree on the order. The jab traveled. Lee's head moved 3 inches off the centerline. A bob built on the Wing Chun principle of economy of motion, the idea that a movement which travels only the distance required to achieve its objective is superior to a movement that travels any further. 3 inches was exactly the distance required. Not 4. Not 2. Simultaneously, Lee's right hand, moving in what Jeet Kune Do practitioners call a stop hit, a simultaneous counter that uses the opponent's forward momentum as part of the strike's energy, traveled toward Reeves's exposed solar plexus along the shortest possible line. It stopped 1 centimeter from contact, not because Lee pulled it, because he had calculated the stopping point before the movement began, and his body, after 14 years of training 6 days a week, 2 to 4 hours a day, executed the calculation with the precision of a machine that has been given a specific distance and told to travel exactly that far. Reeves looked down at the fist resting 1 centimeter from his midsection. He had not seen it coming. That was the moment, that specific realization, not the technique, not the speed, but the fact that he, Dale Reeves, 47 wins, 30 years of training, had not registered the counter-strike until it was already there. That was when Commander Dale Reeves's knees did not buckle exactly, but his weight shifted backward slightly, and he took a half step to stabilize, and everyone watching understood that the half step had nothing to do with being hit. That's not a demonstration of speed. That's the elimination of the margin between thought and motion. Lee stepped back again. Same posture, same stillness. 14 people began talking at once. Reeves raised his hand and they stopped. 3 witnesses. 2 seconds. 1 counter-strike that never landed and could not be recalled. Lee had never performed, never shown off. Every movement had been the minimum required. The Wing Chun principle of Chiso, of closest tool to target, of refusing to spend more energy than the situation demands. The jab of a heavyweight boxing champion had not required a spinning back kick or a shout or a dramatic fall. It had required a 3-inch head movement and a straight line. Reeves stood in the September heat and looked at the man in the civilian shirt. He said nothing for a moment. Then he said, "Do it again. But this time I want to feel it." Alan Sato, from 20 feet away, closed his eyes briefly. Lee tilted his head. He said, "Are you sure?" Reeves said he was sure. What happened next was not a fight. It was a lesson delivered in the vocabulary of impact. Lee moved through 3 exchange sequences in the following 40 seconds. Not striking to injure, but striking to inform. A half-power palm hit to the shoulder that moved Reeves's 214 pounds backward 3 full steps. A finger jab that stopped at the throat and let Reeves understand, with clinical precision, exactly what vulnerable meant. A low-line kick to the inside of the lead knee. Not a sweep, not a stomp, but a touch, measuring the joint, teaching it about its own angles. Not once did Reeves get close to landing. Not because he was slow. He was not slow. He was genuinely fast, a 47-win fighter with collegiate-level footwork who was fully committed to landing. He did not land because the man in front of him moved on principles that Reeves's training had not given him the language to intercept. Jeet Kune Do does not block, it intercepts. It does not evade, it redirects. It does not counter. It simultaneously defends and attacks along the same line, using the opponent's force as part of the equation. That is not cleverness. That is physics applied with enough precision to become art. At the 37-second mark, Reeves stopped, not because he was hurt, because he understood, in the specific way that a genuinely skilled practitioner understands when he has encountered something outside his map, that continuing was not going to produce a different result. The arena held its breath. Lee stepped back one final time. The same posture, the same stillness. The September light caught the topography of those conditioned knuckles and the flat surface of a face that showed no exertion whatsoever. Marcus Webb, behind Reeves, said, "What just happened?" Nobody answered him for 3 full seconds. Reeves asked everyone to give them a moment. The crowd dispersed, not quickly, with the reluctant drift of people who do not want to miss what comes next. Webb lingered, then saw Reeves's expression and moved away. Alan Sato walked to the tent entrance and stood with his back to them, giving privacy by occupying the edge of the space. The 2 men stood facing each other in something that had stopped being a demonstration and become something harder to name. Reeves said, "I've been training for 30 years. I've never not seen a punch coming." Lee was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "You saw it. You just didn't see it soon enough to matter. That's different." Reeves looked at him. "How do you get it that fast?" Lee said, "I got rid of everything that wasn't the punch. Most fighters train to add more techniques, more combinations, more responses. I spent years subtracting. If you train every possible technique, you'll be choosing between them when the moment comes. If you train only the truth of motion itself, where the body wants to go when force is applied to it, there's nothing left to choose." Reeves was quiet. This was the kind of statement that, in his world, would have sounded like philosophy. But he had just spent 37 seconds receiving its demonstration, and it did not sound like philosophy. He said, "That's Wing Chun." Lee said, "Wing Chun taught me the shape of it. I've spent the last 6 years dissolving the shape, so only the principle remains. Reeves shook his head, not in disagreement, but in the specific motion of a man recalibrating. He said, "I've got 60 guys in my program who need to know this." Lee said, "What they need to know is that their training is teaching them answers. Teach them to ask better questions." That line would stay with Commander Dale Reeves for the rest of his life. They stood for another moment in the cooling afternoon. The jet fuel smell was still there. The bay glittered at the edge of the installation. Reeves extended his right hand, and Lee took it, not with the pumping grip of a victorious competitor, but with the quiet pressure of a man completing a circuit. Reeves said, "I apologize for the way this started." Lee said, "It started fine." Then he said, "The door you walked through just now, that question you asked about how, that's the door worth walking through. Most people spend their whole lives on the other side of it." Reeves would say later that he didn't fully understand what Lee meant until he was standing in front of his own class 2 weeks later and realized he was asking his students entirely different questions than he'd been asking them before. Years later, in 1974, Dale Reeves retired from the Navy and opened a private martial arts instruction program in Oakland. He did not teach boxing. He did not teach judo or wrestling or any of the individual disciplines he had spent decades mastering. He taught what he called, borrowing a phrase from a conversation on a September afternoon in 1967, combat principles rather than combat answers. His curriculum was considered eccentric for its time. Instead of drilling combinations, he had his students drill single responses until the response was no longer a decision but a reflex, and then he had them abandon the response and find the principle underneath it. His program produced, over the following 20 years, for students who won regional martial arts championships, 2 who went into professional law enforcement instruction, and 1, a woman named Carmen Valerio, who became a pioneer in the emerging field of civilian self-defense education for survivors of domestic violence. None of them had ever heard of Bruce Lee directly from Reeves. He never told the Alameda story to his students, not once, in 20 years of teaching. He considered the story irrelevant. The lesson, he felt, had no origin story that mattered. The lesson simply was. Alan Sato told the story for the first time in a 1982 interview with a small martial arts publication called The Way. His account was specific. The date, the base, the 41 witnesses, the 37 seconds. The publication had a circulation of approximately 800 readers. The story passed, largely unnoticed, out of the official record and into the underground current where Bruce Lee's real history tends to live. Commander Reeves died in 1991. In his personal effects, his daughter found a single index card, yellowed, undated, with 4 words written in ballpoint pen in a hand she didn't recognize. The words were, "No way is way." She didn't know what it meant. She kept the card anyway. Now we go back to the gate, the chain link, the tarmac, the California sun, the 2 men facing each other across 20 feet of September afternoon. A decorated champion with 47 wins and 30 years of training on one side. A slight Chinese-American man in civilian clothes on the other side, weighing 138 pounds, standing completely still. The order to leave has just been given, and the man it was given to is not going to leave. Not because he is defiant, not because he is prideful, not because he has anything to prove. He is going to stay because Commander Reeves has just asked him, in the only language that this gate can understand, the only question that leads anywhere worth going. One question, one afternoon, one lesson that 41 people carried home in 41 different directions, and none of them fully dropped. He didn't fight with force. He didn't fight with tricks. He fought with the principle underneath every technique. And on a September afternoon in Alameda in 1967, a Navy commander finally understood what that meant. One moment, one question, one truth that takes a lifetime to stop learning. But here is what almost no one knows about Bruce Lee's relationship with the military establishment in California. There was one encounter, not a demonstration, not a challenge met in the open air, that Bruce Lee never discussed publicly. Not once. Not in any interview. Not in any letter. Not in any of the training journals. 1973. The people who know about it have never fully agreed on what happened. And the reason Bruce Lee stayed silent about it